Hello everyone, and welcome to my campaign starter guide for Bannerlord. In this guide, we'll be focusing on tips and some advice to help you guys in the early game with Bannerlord. The game could be very confusing. We'll be continuing off the playlist from the original first video. We focus primarily on charm, leadership, trade, tactics, and a bit of horse archery to ensure ourselves a strong early gameplay. Due to the fact that skills in general in this game are very hard and very long to obtain, so that was our primary focus, to get as much money as possible. You will always start in the beginning region in the South Empire, and the main focus will be to get gold. Influence. Gold will be needed to build caravans and to fund your empire. Influence is something that you'll be utilizing when you actually have a kingdom or you're part of a kingdom to influence decisions, supporting different lords. Your hit points is extremely important due to the fact that if you don't really die in this game, but if your health is brought down to 1%, like if you died in a battle, you won't die, but you're at 1% health. You can no longer lead your men in battle. So if you get attacked again, you can only auto battles. Having your troops being wounded or being ready can determine your carry weight or the number of prisoners you have. Let's say you have 80 prisoners because you have an army of 140 guys. If half of them get wounded in the battle, you can't support the prisoners anymore. Food is pretty considerable. As in your early game, food's not that important, but stock up on a little bit of food and you should last a good number of days and weeks. Morale is extremely detrimental in this game due to the fact that if your troops' morale is super low, you can have a full army and your guys will just run away because they simply just don't have the morale to hold up in their lines. Speed is very important, but as you build, like for example, like a lot of units of light cav, speed is not really that crazy. I mean, with the map, with how the game's designed, you can corner armies very easily. As for your clan, the whole point of your goal is to get as much renown in the top right as much as possible. As you complete quests and battles and a number of different deeds, your renown will go up and your clan tier will go up. The clan role currently I would say is not working, but at least set it to quartermaster. That makes sense for anyone that's hiring or building an army. But for your members, never build a party. Unfortunately, whenever I've created parties, it just seems to be a money waste. I create a party, and they can't even serve you. But this is only for the early access, due to the fact that it is still just April 8th, so they might have patched it by now, but right now parties are extremely wasteful. What you should be doing with your companions is to build caravans. It costs about 21,000 gold. 1,000 gold to buy your companion, 15,000 gold to buy the caravan, and then to have 5,000 gold as a safety net. But in the beginning of the campaign, your main focus is to get a certain number of soldiers, like maybe 10 to 15 soldiers, then to head towards the towns. Towns are a really good place to go to because you want to go straight to the arena. You can wager some gold. You can save scum a little bit. When you go to the tournament master, simply go up to him and ask him, go through his dialogue, and find the dialogue that mentions where are the nearby tournaments. Every city has a tournament master, and you can always find out where's the next tournament, where can I make money. As you click on the left click on the cities, simply hit the tracking icon, and then leave. And then we can actually move on to our objective. It's also very useful to do this with your main quest, because more than likely, as you're traveling around the world, you will come across the lords to continue your main quest. As you reach these cities, also keep in mind of certain quests that you can do with the characters in the top right. If you see a blue exclamation mark, that's a side quest you can take. If you see an orange exclamation mark, that's part of your main quest. But let's say you don't want to make money from doing tournaments. You can also make money through going to a variety of different villages and then taking those resources to a large main city. Like, for example, we have sheep in this area. Oh, but we have horses, a horse breeder in this little village. You can buy those horses and then take it to a distant area which doesn't have a horse farm, and you can sell it with a uptick in profit. Also, you'll be making more money just because of those early game bartering penalties you no longer have. That was the focus of the skills video. Now, as we look around, we're heading to the next tournament. We're slowly building up the army. We see a 20 looters on the side there. We'll skip them for now. And as we approach this city, we keep hiring small recruits, and then we go to the arena. But be sure to save. My personal opinion for people who are starting this game, tournaments are a great way to learn the game, to learn the combat, and you can also get a good chunk of money, even though they nerfed it, and you can also get some good starter gear without paying for it. For example, we got a helmet here we can use. Wage high and go straight in. Now, javelins aim a little high, not too high. You can get those targets very easily. Be very adaptive in situations in this game. It looks bad, well, because it kind of is. Don't get hit by that javelin. Get it in one tap you. Save right there. Now I could stay on the ground here, but I was like, no, forget this. I see a dead lancer on the ground there. I'm gonna take hold left alt, and then take that spear, and then find a horse and then use it against them. Quick poke in the head, and we all of a sudden have a pretty good advantage.
No quarter for the Craven!
If you are playing as the archer, I would focus on the other archers as soon as possible, but be sure to dance a little bit so you don't get hit by their shots. I'm trying to time these arrow perfectly. Okay, there we go. Whenever you're dealing with shields, get up close to their right and just keep it doing side attacks. It confuses the AI in actually trying to target you. You'll mostly deal with shielded enemies, shield sword enemies, mostly in the Empire region. And just take advantage of this tactic. Simply hugging the right side and do side attacks. You're guaranteed to win every fight. Skip the round, bet hard, and then just continue doing the side attacks. Here's another example. Block first attack, and then just quickly hold his right side and just keep side swing. Even if you get hit once, just continue the pattern and you'll beat the AI. Now, the great thing about tournaments is that you gain renown, you get a helmet, so better gear, and you get some good earnings. It's a good way to make money at the very early game. So now we made like over 800 gold. So now we can take advantage of that. We can have ourselves a nice helmet, and we can start building up our money reserve so we can actually field these caravans as soon as possible. But be very careful. Whenever you do a quest or from any of the NPCs, be sure to save before, because some of the quests can break the game. Some of the quests are flat out cheating. I had a quest where they spawned 100 bandits just because my army had 70. Mountain bandits with heavy calf. Oof. Whenever you're in a tavern, be sure to look for the heavily armed characters. They don't come out, obviously, but whenever you're building troops, You can find these mercenaries in the taverns almost in every city. They could be thugs, they can be armed bowmen, crossbowmen. It's a variety of different units. And you can also find the companions that you'll eventually be using. These companions, I wouldn't really recruit them for your army because they're not that powerful, they're not that useful, but they will be they'll be extremely important when it comes to building your caravans. But do keep in mind, with caravans, it takes about a week for them to actually build up their caravan, build up their goods, build up their small force, and then you'll receive the return in investment when it comes to those armies. As you're continuing with the campaign, just keep recruiting on the side units, and then look for easy targets. For example, this 8 looters. It generally is pretty even, but since we're on horseback with a bow and arrow, we could take advantage of that against these weak looters. Eventually, in the late game, you can just auto these battles, and you will actually gain more experience by actually fighting themselves, actually fighting them. And you will suffer no losses. I have yet to suffer any losses to looters in the mid to late game. Just use them as, think of them as XP pinatas.
Infantry!
But in the early game, just be very careful. Through the screen, we can see there's one wounded looter, so we're going to take him and then ransom him off. Simply just click the double arrow, take him, start vetting up some of your own units, and with this looter, when you take prisoners, you can convert them to your army eventually, but with looters, it's generally not much of a point. You're better off going after the more advanced bandits or the minor factions if you want to convert them to your army. And with that, we can continue building up our force and then essentially rinse and repeat a number of different cycles, from going to tournaments, hitting up looters, or buying resources to simply satisfy the gold amount. Once you hit that 21,000 gold mark, you can start building caravans, and then you try to build a second caravan and the third caravan. Once you have a really solid income of gold, you could then plan on building a better army, building heavy cav units, heavy infantry, crossbowmen and such. You can start bribing lords to join your faction. As with that prisoner, go to the tavern and ransom him off. Unless you want to keep him and convert him to your army. That's also not a bad idea, but you can't really do too much with that. As for the campaign map, we'll be discussing the overall point of view in the general world. When it comes to the tournaments, and you want to deal with shield and sword, stay within the Empire region. Once you start going to different regions, like the Batnians, they focus primarily on two-handed tournaments. The Vladians focus very heavily on horses with lances, so if you like horse and lance tournaments, that is your definitely area. The Nordic factions to the north, they focus primarily on axes, two-handed, and spears, while the Kuzites to the east, they focus primarily on horse archery and such, and while the Aserai in the very south focus on a number of mixed weapons. My personal preference and my personal suggestion for everybody that is starting their first campaigns would be to stay in the Empire region and take advantage of that shield sword mechanic while you can. Now, in other news in regards to the entire this is more like mid-tier to advanced knowledge to what's going on with the campaign map. Do understand that right now there's currently 2 Snowballing Factions that are generally dominating the map. Towards the west, you have the Vlandians, which are very strong with their horsemen, and the Kuzites to the far east. These two factions are generally dominating in snowballing due to the fact that they're pretty safe. They don't have to worry about their west, and the Kuzites don't really have to worry about their east, so they can stay focused on an enemy and not worry about their backs. So the Vlandians generally go after the Sturgians, and the Sturgians are just to the straight north. Unfortunately, like for example, Rayville and Varchang, reinforcements cannot arrive from the eastern side of Sturgia before the Vladians win their sieges. So quite quickly the Sturgians fall apart just due to the fact that their territory is just so narrow. The Batians, they're strong. They're right next to the Vlandians, but they can hold their ground a little bit. But once the Vlandians start taking a lot of power from the Sturgians, they then consolidate that power and they take over the Batians. And once the Batians are gone and half of Sturgia is gone, it's pretty much game over against the Vlandians. Funny enough, though, it all comes down to what faction you want to pick and where you want to build your kingdom at. If I was to suggest to new players, try focusing and taking advantage of the civil war in the Empire. There will always be one Empire faction that's the weakest, then the second weakest, and then you can exploit those factions in creating your kingdom. But that's generally for making your own independent kingdom. It's a much harder campaign. If you like a more simple campaign, then I would suggest playing as joining one of the Snowballing Factions. But it all comes down to personal preference. Here I'm going to show off a campaign further ahead to show you like how's the campaign progressed, because I'm trying to build my own independent kingdom. And you can see here very clearly of what's going on. The Vlandians are taking over the Nords. They've almost completely wiped out the Batians. The Kuzites are not actually really strong, but they are pushing into Aserai territory. And then once the South Empire is going up against the Kuzites, there really isn't much they could do. Those horse archers just devastate Empire armies without a challenge. And the Vlandians, I'm pretty sure that the only reason the Vlandians are doing so well is because they primarily focus on horse units. So they have an advantage in catching armies out in the field, which is how they're doing so well. As for me, I'm looking for my first settlement to conquer, and I found this Batian stronghold just out in the middle of nowhere, far away from their main cities. That is a very opportunistic target for me to take over, because they're too busy dealing with the Vlandians. We'll go ahead and move to my current campaign, and I can show off how things have changed dramatically overall in the campaign. I did take advantage of that castle, and then I waged a pretty hefty, long civil war against the Western Empire. I can support up to 200 troops. I have my own independent kingdom. I have 3 settlements under my control, but just look at the map. It's basically Vlandia versus the Kuzites. The Southern Empire has completely fallen, and the Vlandians took advantage of my civil war against the Western Empire, and they just took over like 2 cities that I was in the middle of like dealing with. So this campaign, the funny thing is, like, this game's all about dealing with lords and such. For example, this like taking over these cities is great, sieging is great, but the real power is actually bribing and convincing other lords to join your faction. I made the mistake in like basically chopping heads off of my enemies to prevent them from having generals. But in doing so, it makes my job a lot harder and a lot more expensive to convince other lords to join my faction. If you want to continue making more and more gold, simply go around and just buy out enterprises and then have that source of income continue funding your empire. If I didn't convince this clan to join my faction, I wouldn't even maintain control of these 3 settlements. So a big goal, I would try to avoid chopping heads off, even though it's kind of fun, but focus primarily on trying to convince lords to join your faction. Focusing on those early skills to get charm really high up and having a good amount of gold, and having the Bannerlord, you can convince many factions to join you. For example, this guy controls like 3 settlements and a couple of castles. And I'm like, okay, he controls some very important cities. If I go up to him and I bribe him, he can control these settlements, and all of a sudden I've doubled the size of my empire. Well, the thing is, as the game progresses, their demands grow high. He wants 1.2 million gold pieces. 1.2 million. So the late game is very interesting, but it almost seems to the fact that you can buy out your enemies. You can buy out your enemy's forces, and then you use that to your advantage. You just simply have to play like a ridiculous game of Monopoly with the other factions. But overall, it was a great learning experience. Do I expect to win this campaign? Probably not. I have about 1,000 troops in total versus the Kuzites and the Vlandians both owning about 8,000 troops. So if I go to war with both of them, 16,000. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you have any questions or concerns, be sure to put it in the comments below, and I'll be more than happy to answer them.